Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for this webinar on social media and the job search, the do's and don'ts of social media. My name is Jody Hammer, and I am the Career Services Specialist for NPCA's Global Reentry Program. So I have the distinct privilege of working with you, the job seekers who are RPCVs and evacuees, and helping you with your job search by doing a variety of webinars. We do podcasts, as well as some one-on-one assistance as well. So if you do have questions for me, please reach out as well. Happy to be here with you tonight talking about this topic of social media and really the do's and don'ts of social media. So what I like to say to people right away is social media can be your best friend and it can also be your worst enemy. And so a lot of people, think of social media as, social. I mean, by nature, right? That's the name of it. It's for social. So whatever I put on there, that's completely apart from my professional, job search, and you think of it as being so different and not connected at all, and so no real risk. But as we're going to talk about tonight, there's a lot of connection, and you do need to be very careful about what you are using, how you're using it, what you're posting, how you're posting it, in terms of how that speaks about you and maybe your professionalism and things like that. When you're in a job search, it's actually pretty important that we keep things pretty professional and all of that. So let's get started and talk a little bit about social media how it can be helpful for job seekers, right? Obviously, for people connecting, when I talked about it being social, it's a great way to keep in touch, right, with your extended family, friends, your former Peace Corps volunteers. I know, I served in Peace Corps far before the whole, online era, YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook, all of that, right? I mean, literally, I served in the 90s, and it was really before even cell phones were big, right? So we didn't have, a lot of that, and we still wrote the handwritten letters that would, take weeks to get, to our home, if ever, all of that. So kind of a different time to serve, right? But the great thing is, I feel my point of sharing that is I've been able to reconnect with so many of my fellow Peace Corps volunteers from Ecuador. And we have a group, and there's a lot more energy and enthusiasm for connecting and staying connected, and it's so much easier to stay connected, right? It's hard to remember what everyone's doing, but when you can go into your social media and be like pumping the name, it's like, oh yeah, they're working there, that's right. And they can help you in so many ways too, just I mean, the personal aspect, but then from the job, the job search arena, you never know who knows others who might be helpful in your industry or a specific job that you're going for, things like that. So you can really tap into people much easier, keep up to date with people, keep in contact with them. And then there's a lot of different reasons why it can be helpful for the job seeker. So it can really help you connect with that right opportunity, right? And that the right opportunity may be, a job that might be posted on, with LinkedIn or something like that, right? And you find out about the job because you're on social media. Maybe one of the groups that you're on Facebook is a group, that's for communications professionals or whatever it is, right? And you see a job or an opportunity or something, a conference that's really, that would be very helpful for you, beneficial. Maybe it could move you more in the direction of what you're looking to do and where you're looking to go. So it's just been, very, very, it can be very, very helpful, right? It can also connect you to the right people, right? When you do those LinkedIn people searches, for example, you find a job with Catholic Relief Services and you're thinking this would be an awesome job. So you type in, you go to your, LinkedIn, and you do your little, click on the search bar, and then, click, the former company, all you want to see all of the different options, for the search criteria, and all you really care about is the name of the company that you're looking to work for, and then the past company put in Peace Corps, and that's going to connect you to many different RPCVs who might be working or have worked at that particular company. So it can be really helpful for you in those ways as well. It builds your professional, you can build your professional brand through social media. A lot of times this is, for example, on LinkedIn, where there's a lot of different groups on there, right? And of all the social media ones that are out there, right? Definitely LinkedIn is considered the most professional one, right? So if nothing else, LinkedIn, do a LinkedIn profile. They used to say, if nothing else, Facebook and LinkedIn, but a lot of people have actually left Facebook for a variety of reasons. And, it's so, but now they say more, the industry will say at minimum, do LinkedIn. You want them to be able to find you somewhere online, right? Because as I'll talk about a little bit later, if you can't be found at all and you're kind of this ghost, they're wondering, why aren't they on any of these? Oh, do they not know how to use these platforms? That's a sign of maybe issue with being able to do the company. Are they going to, or do they have something to hide? There's lots of things, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But back to the helpful tools here. Building your professional brand, it can be really essential in helping you kind of become known more, right? If you're in a group and you're posting some, professional types of articles, food for thought, in that area, you kind of become almost known as, in a sense, if you will, a thought leader, right? I mean, you're building your professionalism and you're sharing helpful information for other professionals. So they get to know your name coming up on their feed. And that's a very good thing for when you're trying to do a job search, right? When people recognize you as somebody in the industry. So it's like, wow, yes, I know that name. So that can be really helpful, right? You do want to be careful when you are posting, articles. Make sure that they're very relevant and that they're very professional. You don't want it to reflect negatively on you. So that's a couple of the things on how it can be, so helpful and such. Are there other reasons that anyone can think of and you want to drop into the chat box, like other ways that you feel social media has been a helpful tool for you as a job seeker? If you have any thoughts on that, you're welcome to dump them into the chat box now. Okay. All right. So it can be actually just really helpful in so many ways. So let's go ahead and talk about why social media is important. Well, first of all, it really is an extension of yourself, right? It's different than your resume. Your resume and your cover letter, they tell your professional story. That's true. And hopefully very professionally, right? But oftentimes it's on your resume, for example, you don't even use complete sentences, right? It's more of the ed action verb, fragment sentences, active ed action verbs that we recommend using. So it doesn't the social media can give you more of an insight into the person, right? It's an extension of yourself, a little more about probably your personality or your kind of way of being. It can show what your passions are, what's important to you, things like that, right? And I think that, for example, with Facebook, let's talk about Facebook for a minute, right? That can be an opportunity to really, help. um, you can promote and share some really great things, but it's also a place where people tend to vent, right? And I think that's a natural and normal tendency to, want to, be venting on certain things, whether it's politics or other kinds of, issues that are happening, atrocities, just there's been so much, gosh, let's look at even this last year, that it can really, there is, that's that forum for that as well. But you do want to be somewhat careful, I guess, is the thing when you're, using your Facebook. If you have Facebook, for example, make sure that you're professional, that you're not. I mean, I guess when people see when they end up seeing posts, and sometimes they can't see, I know you shut it off for, I mean, make sure that it's only for your specific friends. But a lot of times, and I'll talk a little bit later as well on the whole recommendation of acting as if everything that you put out there can be seen by everybody, because oftentimes things do get out more, and so that can really hurt you or help you, right? Depending. So but most companies also do use LinkedIn to evaluate who's the best, fit, or who will fit into their team dynamics or their office culture the best, right? I mean, they can tell a lot about you from your resume, right? Some of your skills and what you say, assuming you're telling the truth, of course. But the kinds of experience that you have and what you've done. But really seeing your social media is going to give them more of an insight into that, kind of beyond the specific thing that you did and you achieved this, and all of that. What kind of what kind of feel does that LinkedIn account have? How professional are they? What kinds of attitudes do they have? Are they getting involved in rants on the social media page there, where this all out fight with somebody? Or are they being professional, and whether it's retracting from that kind of behavior, whatever. Um so that's important as well, right? Employers really do look at LinkedIn. In fact, you'll see several different stats, but one of the most recent ones with Career Builder had shown 80 or 85%, I think it was, but you'll see anything from like 70 to 85, 90 percent of companies, employers looking right at your Facebook posts. That's a pretty big percentage, right? You want to make sure that that's not going to turn them off, right? And my point in this third bullet is that employers do look, and they do sometimes change their minds. It can be frequently based on social media, what they see there. 50+% didn't hire someone based on online content. That was in that same study. That's wow. That's a lot, right? That's a pretty large stat. So you want to make sure that you're doing social media correctly, right? So let's talk a little bit on social media postings for job seekers, because a lot of times we're posting things, and you look at the picture on the right here, and you have, that may be some kind of a more, you know, um, a club or an organization, whatever. This is actually from like Peace Corps, right? It's one of the Peace Corps, your Peace Corps colleagues, right? So sometimes you're posting things and you're posting it to them, and it's just to kind of connect with them or whatever. But a lot of times it's when you're trying to do it for when you're trying to get a job, and you're wanting to be cognizant of the fact that you need to follow certain kind of tips. That's when you want to these are some of the ones that you want to follow here. So for example, don't expect it to work overnight, right? It definitely takes time. So you're really building your brand, right? You're building your online presence. That's not going to just be boom and it's up. It definitely does take some time. So the other thing is, you don't want to just start your LinkedIn account, for example, right before you're applying for your jobs, because it's not going to necessarily be that impressive for somebody to look up your LinkedIn and see that you have 10 contacts, and you just started your profile recently, right? So it's better to get that done now. If you're, for example, if you're in grad school, or you're not necessarily doing a job search yet, get that LinkedIn or whatever other ones that you want to put together, get them up and running, so that you at least have some traction once you actually need it, right? um, and then don't share all your thoughts or emotions, right? Sift through, keep some things private, right? The employer who's looking at this, they don't know you, right? And so they don't know, maybe that's your dry sense of humor or your sarcasm, right? So they might take comments that you make out of context when they see them, and they could evaluate you negatively because of that. So just be really careful about those kinds of things as well. Oftentimes, you'll hear, what are the topics you should avoid, right? And so religion, politics, and sometimes even sports, right? That can get people fired up as well. Hard to do, I think, especially politics these days, and when it's so much the face of our reality and such. So that can be tough. But recommending keeping some of those things to yourself, or being very exclusive on who you're sharing certain things with. And then you definitely don't want to ignore social media and just say, I'm just not going to be on it. There's too many fear, there's too many risks, there's too many, whatever. I'm just going to keep off of it. And the reason you don't want to do that is because if you're invisible, right, or a ghost, if you will, you're not, an employer goes and they try to find you and they put in your name and there's nothing that comes up, that is actually considered suspicious. And so, as I was alluding to, as I was saying earlier, actually in the intro, that's when they get concerned that either you don't know how to do it, or you're not comfortable with, social media, or there's a reason that you don't have yours. It's suspicious. There's something you're trying to hide. And either of those reasons don't leave, obviously, a very good taste in an employer, in a prospective employer's mind when they're comparing you to maybe the other finalists, right? And sometimes, in terms of when they'll look at, your profile, I mean, I would say most that I've heard of and learned of, they'll do it definitely before they might well do it before they hire you. Sometimes they'll do it as that final screening, right? Like maybe it's after they've talked to you in the interview and all of that, and then they do that one afterwards. A lot of times they'll do it before they bring you in, but after you've applied and they've looked at your resume, all of that, but before they bring you in for the interview, they want to kind of get a little bit more, a little more information and tell, if you might be a good fit or not. Maybe they don't want to waste their time with an interview if that's not, if something comes out that just appears that you just wouldn't really fit in their company very well. It's expensive to do, interviewing and hiring people and all of that. So that's important as well in terms of, and when they do it can vary, right? I don't know many who do it right when they get when they first get it and they're deciding. I guess, they certainly could, if they're deciding who they want to bring in even for an interview and they have a lot of candidates, they might, look and see as well. Yeah. So any questions coming up yet? Anything coming up? Andrew, thanks for that comment from earlier, the setting up career chats. Yep. That's a great way to do it, with social media and such, with LinkedIn, for example. Try to connect with them even when you're not connected, or you're not connected directly and you have maybe a secondary contact or whatnot. Absolutely. Great. Okay, let's move on. Let's look a little bit at the social media do's and don'ts, right? So the don'ts. I mean, I think the original title of this session was the, social media no-nos, but I wanted to make sure to cover both the no-nos or the don'ts, as well as the what you want to do, right? To leave you on more of a positive note, hopefully. So a couple of things here. Don't just reach out and contact the top executive you can find, right? Or the president right away. It's probably best to seek a more appropriate contact for your position. So for example, if you're going for, the reason for that is because typically the president or the top executive, they're on social media for a different kind of reason and maybe connecting, but they're not necessarily the person that has the best inside knowledge as to whatever job that you're trying to apply for. You might have better luck if you were going for a some kind of graphic design or some kind of communications or marketing, to try to find somebody more that's in that area, right? That would be able to give you a little more of that insight into the area that you're most interested in, right? So secondly, you don't necessarily want to post far and like really post it, far and wide, that you're actively seeking a new position if you're currently working, right? And you're trying to keep things a little bit quiet initially, which totally makes sense. I literally just got a call from an RPCV who actually said, thanks for doing, it was a session I did in the past where I mentioned, like you want to kind of maybe keep things on, the down low a little bit, because the possible repercussions. And she just said, I just wanted to tell you that's exactly what had happened to me. They found out that I was doing a job search and they, let me go then. That's not always, that's not always illegal to do that. They, if you're an at-will employee and, you can be let go at any time, they decided, maybe if she was looking elsewhere, that they wanted to have somebody who was, committed to the company. And, she was, it was unfortunate, obviously, but she just said that's a great tip. So, keep that in mind when you are working and you're looking at, the next job. If you're trying to keep it quiet, you just want to be very careful about how you spread the word. Not that you don't spread the word, not that you shouldn't spread the word, but you can do it in a different way, right? People, being on LinkedIn, for example, it's a good idea to, people have under their titles kind of, what their specialties are. And you're just always looking for, just looking to develop yourself professionally. And you're just connecting with people and staying connected in the field. And, all of that is expected and totally fine as well. But you're not just putting on there seeking job ASAP, in whatever company. So you want to keep that a little bit more under the radar. So you also want to be sure that you're not posting inappropriate, photos, videos, things like that. You might think that, oh, they're funny, people know I'm joking, but that people have different senses of humor, number one, and number two, you just want to always be that, like, that professional, at all times. You're going to be the person that's going to be professional and is going to, in a work type of, environment, right? And again, that's why you wouldn't really want to be maybe on, on LinkedIn is more of the professional one, right? But even be careful about, Facebook. So posting, signs. I mean, sometimes I'm amazed, actually, I have to say, I'm sometimes really amazed at what gets posted on people's, I've seen like people's LinkedIn. Oh, sorry. I've seen people's LinkedIn. Yes, so sorry. And I've seen, like some of the pictures that, people will have, right? Or even for maybe like a profile picture, they'll like trim themselves out of a group shot, but it's obvious there's, drinks involved, and maybe they have a drink in their hand and whatever. And, you just want to be really careful about that. You want to make sure that, your profile, any pictures that you have there are professional, are going to speak to you, as a professional, and, not give people the wrong impression, right? So, and some of these are like so obvious, right? I mean, make bigoted comments, with regard to religion, race, gender, all of that. You want to be, very professional, and never badmouth your previous employer or your current employer or fellow employees. That kind of thing comes around to you oftentimes, right? And if an employer actually sees that you've, badmouthed, a previous employer, even a previous employer, right? And or, employees, they're led to believe, wow, well, if they talk like that about them, what are they going to say about us, right? So just a couple things to keep in mind. Okay. Any other don'ts that you can think of off the top of your head from the audience? If anyone has one, you can certainly drop it in the chat box with don't and whatever your advice is, and we'll share it to everyone else. Or you can unmute yourself if you prefer. There's a lot of don'ts. These are just some of the ones. So in terms of the do's, let's go on to the do's. And likewise, if you have any other suggestions for this slide, other things that you do with posting, for social media as a job seeker that you think are effective, putting them, just put do and then in the chat box and then whatever it is, and we'll share that. That would be great. So a couple of the do's. First of all, use social media, right? As we were saying before, don't just be that ghost or that, I'm not going to use it, I want to stay away from it, whatever. At minimum, LinkedIn. Find connections between you and the people that you wish to connect with, right? So when you're looking, for example, at someone's, LinkedIn profile, right? You can see a lot about them. It'll usually say where they went to school, what kind of groups they're in now, maybe, lots of things, certifications maybe they've done, and just look for connections. So look for the same things, similar to you, right? Obviously, a fellow RPCV, returned Peace Corps volunteer, is a great connection, because I can't tell you, I mean, the vast majority of RPCVs, if you were to reach out and say, hey, I'm a fellow RPCV, I've just moved to Cincinnati and I'm looking to connect with the, whatever population, would love to connect with you professionally. Most people would, of course, connect with you, right? people want to help. RPCVs in general want to help. Um, and so you can get far that way, right? By finding, but it might be, that maybe they went to the same school. Hey, I'm a fellow alum from the University of Georgia, whatever. And you might, get connections that way too. Okay. Let's see. This goes a long way. I think the projecting, in your LinkedIn account, not everywhere, but project that positive image of yourself, right? So I know that sometimes in the job search, it can get really discouraging and it's hard to remain positive, right? Because it just feels like, you're just putting all these applications out there and you're just not hearing anything, right? And that's really frustrating, right? So, and I get that. And what I talk to, job seekers about is the need to, even when you feel really frustrated, inside, and you're really, like it's just, this is really hard for you. You've never had hard time getting a job before, and this is just a really hard position to be in. I recommend that people try to release that negative energy in other ways. you know Go, play a sport, or do whatever, or do your cardio, some kind of, get out there and run, something that helps you release some of that negative and hold on to that positive, image of, you know um of yourself, and who you are, and what you are as a job seeker, all of that, right? That's so important. So just try to do that as well. Post as if everyone can see, and I mentioned this earlier very briefly, right? That's always safest, I think, just to say, I'm going to post this, and regardless, I may do all the tightening restrictions that I can, but post it as if anyone else can see. So, it doesn't mean that you have to like stifle what certain things you want to share, or things that, are difficult that you're sharing, whatever. But you can do it in a way where you don't come across as maybe a name caller, or, just, angry, and, that kind of thing. So, also, definitely one of the important things is to really know your digital identity. And this has to do with, if somebody else looks you up, what do they find, right? So Google yourself. And it's quite surprising sometimes, the info that comes up. Have any of you Googled yourself and found information that maybe that wasn't about you, but they have the same name? Anyone? If you have, put it in the chat box, please. Has anyone? Yep. Okay. Awesome. Is this Alice or Andrew? I can hear some.
Me also, and also Andrew. When I Google myself, I find that, oh, this other person with the same name, has all these other things. So it's interesting to find. And I know that but anyway.
Yep, and it is, isn't it? Especially if you have a name that is more common.
Yep.
There's going to be a lot of you, right? So it's going to be hard for the employer to, or other people to find. So then, you Google, you more go into, maybe it's Peace Corps you put in with it, or a certain company that you work with, that kind of thing. Then it helps to get it, down. And that's what an employer will usually do as well. They'll use your resume, and they can look at maybe your past company, or, oh, you were a Peace Corps volunteer. Let's put Peace Corps in to try to narrow it down. So typically that oftentimes works to be able to get you. But have any of you have you come across something that is like negative, where you're like, oh my gosh, what if they think that's me? Somebody who's, whatever, like where they've done something wrong, or they've, it's a totally, different, it's the same name, but a very different identity. Have any of you ever had that, where you've discovered that, and you've tried to figure out how to fix it? Or because that can really be a challenge, right? And in the research that I was doing, there's, one of the options, I've heard of, is there is an option to kind of create a new, cleaner professional identity. But what it usually involves is some variation. You would need to keep Googling yourself, right, with different, like, you know, like your first name, last name, maybe your first name, middle name, last name, or your initial, or your, you know, whatever, like little things, until you know, get to a point where you're not getting these, you know, the plethora of other, you know, other ones and such. So some people will do that, and they'll literally kind of make a clean new identity. I mean, you can do that, right? But that's just one option. But it's but employers as well, you know, employers, they know that there's more than one person, especially the common name. They're like, well, I don't know which one this is, but let me just try. And, you know, but you know, it's not always this, you know, huge deal, because they don't automatically assume that it's you. But some will do that. Anyone else like have suggestions for how to address if there are some identities, maybe things you've done, if you've gotten with your name some other folks? I know that there are actually businesses that will help like clean up your past profile, but of course they'll cost money, you know. So that's always the thing. So anyway, awesome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's go to the next slide here. And I just liked this. I really liked this quote here, you know, a tip. Social media isn't really free. It will cost you time or money, but it's always an investment with great potential for your business. Or in your case, your business is yourself, right? Your job, your job is to get a job. When you're doing a job search, that is basically your full-time job. Now, some are doing it when they have a full-time job or a part-time job, but it takes a lot to get it. So I just like that, because it's kind of, I feel like it's worth it, right? What you put into it is what you'll likely get out of it, you know, the potential that you have from doing it in the right way. Okay. All right, and then that leads us to the Q&A. So basically, if folks have questions now, feel free to put them in the chat box there, or to unmute yourself. And if you want to just say it, we have a small enough group, as I said earlier, that we can certainly do that. I did want to mention, I mean, I know I talked a lot about LinkedIn, you know, which is probably the most professional one, right? And then, you know, Facebook, but there's other ones too, right? There's, what are some of the other ones that you're using? I mean, Instagram has become big in recent years. But there's Pinterest. I mean, some of those are more appropriate depending on what your background is and what you're going for. So if you have more of a like visual type of, you know, graphic design or visual, you know, clothing things, stuff like that, your Pinterest and Instagram are going to be much more important for your line of work, for your, you know, trying to, you know, get jobs, for your job search, than they are for somebody who's not in that much of that media one, right? That most would probably be better served in LinkedIn, that kind of thing. But even if you do, you know, have the visual one, and you have Instagram, and you know, you find that and Pinterest are important and helpful, I would still highly recommend that everybody have the LinkedIn account. Consider, you know, having LinkedIn, because that's the one that most will go to first and foremost, you know, easiest to do. Okay. Any questions coming up? Anyone want to be a brave soul and unmute yourself and ask any question that you might have? And Twitter, we can't forget Twitter, right? Twitter takes more time in terms of, you know, the investment of it and such, but it can be a very good one for, you know, definitely certain lines of work. But yeah. Okay. Let's see if we have any other questions.
Jody, I have a comment. It's not really a
Yes.
question.
Sure.
So in Tanzania, I find this very interesting. I mean, I'm back home now, but so I'm connecting with some of these teachers. You know, these are adult people,
Right.
but they have it's like an alternate. They have a different name and different, you know. So you know, when they friend me, I said, "Who is this person?" and then it turns out to be, oh, this is the teacher that I know, but it's under a different name.
So they're doing that. They're doing that to probably protect their professional, right, reputation and such. Is there more of a fear of maybe getting like repercussions or something?
I don't know. I've reapplied to go back, and so
Okay.
maybe by that time, I will find out. There are at least 2 or 3 people who is using a different name. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're maybe told, oh, you should have a fake name for yourself because otherwise, whatever. I don't know, but I've heard of that kind of situation where people have had a totally different name in order to separate themselves, their professional and maybe personal, accounts or thoughts. And that way, I think they feel they maybe they don't need to censor as much because they can say what they want because nobody will associate it with them except for their inner circle that knows that this is the name they use. So
Yeah. Anyway, so that's just my comment.
yeah, thanks for sharing, Alice. I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions here? All right, well, we are at the 9 o'clock hour, so I will thank everyone. I will thank you and invite you to always reach out if you do have questions and such. You can certainly contact me at career@peacecorpsconnect.org or jody@peacecorpsconnect.org, and that's Jody with an I. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end this then. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you here at another date, another time. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great one.